Well, let's get some more on the impact of these elections in Europe. We've got Professor Achim Hurrelmann, who is an associate professor of political science at Carleton University. He joins me this evening from Ottawa in Canada. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you were able to hear my interview with Bruno Gollnisch from the Front National there. I wonder what you think about these far-right parties in Europe who have undeniably outperformed in these elections. What's going on here? Does this indicate any sort of pan-European ideological shift?
No, I don't think so. I think there were actually elections in 28 European Union member states, and the result in part looked quite different from one state to the next. There has been a lot of attention now on the situation in France and the United Kingdom, because in both of these countries, these Eurosceptic right-wing populist parties came in for the first time ever as the strongest party. But we have a lot of other pictures in other member states. We have in Greece, for instance, a strong move to the left. We have other countries like Germany, Portugal, for instance, where nothing really dramatic happened. We have a situation in Italy where the newly elected Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has actually scored a big victory, and the populist party that did well in the national elections didn't do as well this time. So it's a very fragmented story, I can say.
Speaking of fragmented, let me bring this point up with you, Professor. If these parties across Europe can actually organize themselves into a coherent umbrella body, won't we see them sort of wielding real power in the European Parliament, and how likely is that?
Well, as your reports mentioned, it's not at all assured that they can work together. Nationalists, even where the right wing did well, various nationalists in different countries, they don't necessarily like each other and working together. So it's going to be difficult for them to form any kind of group in the European Parliament. But even if they do, as was also pointed out in your reports earlier, the mainstream so-called informal grand coalition of Christian Democrats, socialists, liberals, and Greens that really dominate the European Parliament still have a very large majority. So I think the day-to-day politics of the European Parliament will maybe not change as much as one might expect. Maybe it should even change more, but there's a strong tendency among European politicians to now just try to move towards business as usual.
Let's talk about the economic perspective here. From an economic point of view, should these results mean a surprise, or have been a surprise rather? I mean, you know, we've had austerity in Greece, we've had double-dip recessions in France, and the UK has been thinking about leaving the EU altogether. It's not really one big happy family.
No, that's correct. So it's not at all surprising. This was the first European Parliament election since the Eurozone crisis, which really had a dramatic effect on a number of the member states. And of course, it resonated with the citizens. And some of them have really been affected by painful austerity measures, but others have just for the first time began to realize that the European Union is very influential politically, and people feel disenfranchised from it, many people. They feel they don't adequately understand what is going on in Brussels. They don't know the institutions. They don't seem to have an influence. Their political participation doesn't seem to matter. So all of this is becoming more and more clear, and it seems to resonate more and more in electoral outcomes as well.
But you mentioned austerity and you mentioned Germany's support of it. Do Europe's leaders have to accept some of the blame here, especially the Germans who have absolutely supported austerity in countries like Greece?
Yes, so certainly these austerity policies are part of the problem, and leaders have to accept blame. But I think the problem actually runs deeper. It goes to the very heart of the European integration process, which has always been an elitist process, and for a long time has actually tried to actively demobilize the citizens to just go ahead in an agreement of political elites. And now European leaders have to find a way to actually take the citizens along, and this is not working yet at this moment. Another interesting fact about this election, for instance, is that electoral turnout did not rise at all in spite of the Eurozone crisis, in spite of attempts by European parties to have more visible front-runner candidates. All of this should really have inflated turnout, but it did not. So it indicates that there's still a large gap between this European integration project and the European citizens.
Stop you there, and thank you for your time spending with us this evening. Professor Achim Hurrelmann from Carleton University joining us from Ottawa, Canada. Thanks so much for joining us.